Hi everyone, Bend City Councilor Melanie Kebler here to go over our agenda for our October 6th, 2021 meeting coming up this Wednesday. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So as always, you can find this agenda link at bendoregon.gov/council agenda. And at the top, because we're meeting virtually again, this is the Zoom link for the public to participate and watch. Or there's also a phone number to call in if you don't use Zoom. And we are going to start this week with a work session and executive session, which means a session that's closed to the public to talk about real property transactions. That's going to be about 15, maybe 20 minutes where the video will not be turned on. And then we will come into a public portion of our work session, starting with this report out of a housing survey that the Bend Chamber of Commerce did, then moving into a discussion of our marketing and management organization, Visit Bend, is our current contractor. And then fifth of interest probably to a lot of people is the discussion of the requests for proposal that we're going to be putting out for services for temporary emergency housing at the 9th Street location that we are considering currently. So what we're going to talk about is what's going to be in the RFP, the request for proposal, that we then put out and ask people to give us their proposals on what they would do with that area and how they would create a managed village in that space. So this is just another step in us exploring that site. It's not a final decision on anything because we need to receive those proposals and deliberate those and get public input on those before we make any final decision. So then moving into Bend Urban Renewal Agency meeting. So this is also called Borough, and this is basically just council putting on a different hat to operate as the agency that oversees our urban renewal, or otherwise known as our tax increment financing plans within the city. So the main thing we're going to be talking about in this Borough meeting is the Core Area Advisory Board, and I'm looking forward to that discussion about how we can make a group of stakeholders and business owners and people that live and work in that area to advise us on the development and redevelopment that's going on in the core area right now. So then we will move on to our regular meeting. And in the good of the order here, we have some proclamations. I'm going to be sponsoring this Domestic Violence Awareness Month proclamation. I spent several years working as a state prosecutor, prosecuting mainly crimes of domestic violence. And then I spent about a decade working as a crime victims' rights lawyer, again, working mostly with victims of violence and sexual assault. So this is an important proclamation for me to bring awareness to this issue. And I'm glad we're going to be hosting Saving Grace, one of our local organizations, for this proclamation. And then I also wanted to highlight that we are going to be looking at an emergency declaration ahead of cold weather. Basically, this says from November 1st on, we have severe weather conditions possible here, and we know it's going to get cold. So we want to give ourselves some flexibility about temporary shelter space for people who need to get out of the cold, and that's what this emergency declaration is about. So then we move into our visitor section, which is our public comment section. And I do want to note, if you are calling in for public comment specifically on the fireworks policy, that's an agenda item lower down, and we're going to let people comment on fireworks policy at the time we do that deliberation on that policy. So people who want to comment specifically on that might need to wait till a little bit later in the meeting. We then move into our consent agenda, which is normally just a list of fairly routine or non-controversial items that we approve all at once. I did want to highlight one item I thought was really good and appropriate was upgrading all of our school zone signage to become signs that have flashing beacons. So that's where you come next to a school and you're supposed to slow down to 20 miles an hour. I don't know anyone else, but when I drive around town, I notice people don't really consistently do that. And hopefully if we convert those signs to flashing beacons that flash during those school hours to remind people to slow down, that might help people to make sure they're doing that and hitting the brakes. And then I also wanted to highlight one item that I'm actually going to ask staff to do a little bit of a presentation on, because I think it's important for the public to see, which is an agreement with the railroad. And here's our design build agreement for a pedestrian underpass on Broster House under the railroad. So if you've ever gone down Broster House here in the southeast part of town, south of Murphy, there's a really, well, first of all, there hasn't really been good pedestrian connection with sidewalks. Those are coming in. We're seeing those being built now. but there's a really bad pinch point where there's a really low bridge right under the railroad, and there's no sidewalk, there's no way, there's no bike lane. You just kind of have to come into the lane and then go around and get to the other side. So this is actually going to create an underpass under the railroad so that people can be separate from the cars and still get through and make that connection to the sidewalks that are being put in there. And just to show a little map so people know where I'm talking about, this is up here, this red and green line is the Murphy improvements that are happening. And then if you go down here, this is where I'm talking about with the Broster House, where it goes under the railroad tracks, right by the new Caldera High School. So this is going to be a really great connector that's been missing for that pedestrian network on this side of town. Okay, and after the consent agenda items, we get into our regular agenda items. We're going to be talking about Juniper Ridge and the Public Works campus that we're working on there. We're going to be having our first reading of the ordinance that staff has brought us on fireworks policy. And again, if you want to comment specifically on fireworks, we're going to have public comment on that topic at this time. We also have our integrated water system master plan, which our staff have been working on, and is a really comprehensive plan for the future of our water system, providing safe, clean drinking water and helping to conserve water in our water system is a really crucial city service. So, and anyone who wants to learn more about water in the city of Bend can look at these documents and tune into this discussion at our meeting. And then lastly, our main agenda, the last item, is our second reading of the House Bill 2001 code amendments, which we discussed at length in our September meeting and gave initial approval to. And this is basically the last step to approve it. And then I can't remember if it's 30 or 60 days after this vote is when the code becomes effective in our code. And then we get into our usual council action reports and city manager reports. So that's the agenda for October 6th of this year, 2021. And again, looking forward to that discussion on the core area advisory group, as well as the discussion on fireworks. And I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff for different people with different interests on this agenda. It's not too long. So I hope you'll tune in. As always, you can send us your input to this email address below, councilall@bendoregon.gov. That goes to all the counselors. And of course, call in for public comment if you have a comment for us. And we listen to all of those. Actually, I note them all down just so I can help me remember them. And I appreciate anyone who tunes in to watch your council work. We'll see you Wednesday. Thanks.